Howdy. Disney has been sneaking out games under the radar pretty much since the 90s, quite a few of which have been lodged in my memory for years now. So let's talk about the old and the new games today. Let's dive into what I consider the top 5 best and worst Disney games. We'll be checking out the video games made under Disney Interactive Studios. So, you know, games like Epic Mickey, the Kingdom Hearts series, Disney Infinity, and so on. And since there's an absolute truckload of these titles, pardon me if I do miss one of your favorites, or a particularly abysmal one. It'd be great to hear your own choices in the comments. So without further monkeying about, onto the countdown. For the 5th worst Disney game, Disney's Magical Mirror, starring Mickey Mouse. Weirdly enough, this game has a reputation for scaring the crap out of people when they were kids. Only for many of us to look back and say, hey, wait a minute, this game isn't scary. It's a circular fire trash can of mediocrity. So aside from childhood trauma, what else does this soulless, dead-eyed, creepy, staring version of our favorite mouse give us? Well, for starters, graphically it falls flat as a pancake. The ugly, kind of black pancake left in the pan so long that it takes 10 minutes to scrub off. Almost every room in the mansion has the same blasé look and the same generic color scheme. Even the camera acts more like a drunken donkey with 3 legs that's having a seizure while dancing on an Irish pub table. The story is basically that Mickey has to get himself out of this bizarre mansion by collecting all 12 mirror pieces after being trapped into said mirror by a malevolent spirit. That may sound kind of interesting, but don't be fooled, because this adventure is a tedious and dull undertaking. You see, to progress, Mickey has to collect keys. Lots and lots of keys. The standard point-and-click affair follows. You click or use a controller to lumber Mickey around, examine and combine items. You also have to pick up the required number of stars to trigger some events. But there's no instruction to collect said stars or mirror shards. We're just somehow meant to have the psychic clairvoyance to know, because the game certainly isn't going to tell us. And all the while, the same asinine, repetitive music loops over and over and over again, to the point the mute button becomes a very welcoming option. Though I warn you, you may occasionally miss Mickey saying, And what a truly unspeakable tragedy to miss such a wondrous spectacle as that. I mean, some of these adventure game puzzles don't even make logical sense. Like, the first mirror shard you find is very obviously sticking out from this rug. But no, you don't just pick it up. You go to the end of the hall, get scared by the ghost, and then the rug lets you pick the shard up. Interestingly, you can actually get Mickey to leave to go home early if you want to. But that results in the bad ending. Of course, a bad ending in Mickey's Magical Mirror means the ghost sadly waving goodbye as you go home. That's it. The good ending, when you collect all the shards, lets the ghost come home with Mickey. Because apparently now we want this creepy ethereal wraith of the dead to follow us. I think they got the endings reversed here. Anyway, Mickey's Magical Mirror is a simple enough point-and-click time sink that's not going to be offensively bad to many people, but it also gets old fast, lacks creativity, and just drones on. And for the 5th best, Epic Mickey. Honestly, I thought Epic Mickey had a beautiful story, and some of the best animation designs I've ever seen on the Wii. I'd even call this story on par with the emotional sophistication of many Pixar movies. But what I felt stood out about Epic Mickey compared to many other Disney games is it wasn't exactly trying to be safe and comfortable. In the world of Wasteland, the ambience of sadness and melancholy just hangs over it. It actually drives me to want to add some more color and joy to the Wasteland world, even if it's only a little bit. Let's start with the story though. Once again, Mickey botches up his Master Yen Sid's experiment and just legs it. After chaos and havoc erupts, Mickey is once again strapped to a table, and once again the Mad Doctor's trying to slice him to pieces. And the Good Doctor has updated his machinery a bit in the last 70 odd years. Like, his machinery and the art design itself here is like a twisted, bleak Disneyland fever dream. It's a darker, paler, twisted world that I really marveled at during gameplay. The flat 50s era cutscenes are really cool too. They're smooth and very expressive, and frankly, some of the acting, animation, and character development here is simply stunning for a video game. Mickey's face can contort in the simplest ways to convey strong emotion to me. It's a shame though, as it's undercut by the fact that at this point, they don't give a voice to Mickey. Like, we all know what Mickey should sound like, so why not voice him? Anyway, Mickey's paintbrush has a power to either magically create or destroy the world around him. Do you want to befriend your enemies or wipe them out of existence? It adds a slight moral element to the gameplay, which is kinda neat. Mickey gradually discovers many dark, sad truths about Wasteland. It's a land of the forgotten and abandoned, the unnecessary and ignored characters from Disney's lore, including Oswald, who fortunately hasn't decided to help us out yet. Why fortunately? Well, more on that later. Right now, he's still rather envious and spiteful about Mickey taking his place back in 1938, and he's had plenty of time to stew on it. If I were to define Epic Mickey's gameplay, I'd say it merges Legend of Zelda with Donkey Kong 64, but the Wii controls reminded me a lot of Mario Galaxy, and I love that game. One big negative though is the camera, which has notoriously weighed down the Epic Mickey series. Unfortunately, it's one of those sluggish cameras you may spend half the time wrestling with, and it can take some getting used to. But on the plus side, I found the story a pretty good length, with about a 15-hour adventure. This is personally about as long as I'd want a Disney adventure to go on for. Overall, I think Epic Mickey is an artistic 3D standout in Mickey's games.
The funny thing about mirrors, our reflections prompt us to reflect.
And for the fourth worst, Epic Mickey 2. Now, hear me out on this one. This one's around the start of the list because it actually retains a lot of the charm of the original, and in my opinion, the cutscenes actually improve upon the original. And we do get some nostalgia appeal here, and a lot of the original Epic Mickey's artistic charm. But the clunky controls, slippy jumping puzzles, and drawn-out bosses make this a frustrating sequel to a pretty decent original game. As I mentioned earlier, the weird monochrome fellow hanging out with Mickey is called Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the true original Disney symbol, before Walt dumped him for Mickey back in 1938, though that may be because Walt lost the rights to him. Anyway, in this game, Oswald's decided to be a real trooper about the last 93 years and help Mickey out. Or, based on his abysmal AI, maybe he's actually sabotaging us. Anyway, more on that later. This is a sequel I wanted to like because so much is in place to make it great. Like, now Epic Mickey has voice acting. In fact, we've got some real star voice talents here you might even recognize from some Disney movies.
I sure hope so, Mickey. I really do.
Yet the gameplay clunkiness holds it back so much. Probably the biggest problem is our buddy Oswald's AI is notoriously terrible. In fact, I'm half convinced our partner in paint here hasn't gotten over his 93-year grudge and is actually determined to thwart us at every turn. We need his electric rabbit powers to progress, yet he'll often run off or just outright stand in the way when we hit a puzzle or need his powers. Even people who really enjoy Epic Mickey 2 often seem to admit the AI on Oswald means he just outright refuses to help you half the time. And when comparing the gameplay visuals to Epic Mickey 1, I just wasn't as impressed with 2. I personally found most of the scenery felt less lush, varied, colourful, and memorable than 1. But that being said, stylistically, it still looks leagues above many other 7th generation console games. But once again, we are given a beautiful musical score. It's a sweeping orchestra filled with whimsical throwbacks to other Disney moments. And when I was taking in both the musical score and the exceptional cutscene voice acting, I really did feel like there was something special to Epic Mickey 2. Many of these creative musical cutscenes are actually performed by the notoriously controversial Mad Doctor. You know, the guy who tried to turn Pluto into a homunculus and saw Mickey in half. Apparently, he sings now.
If we don't band together, Wasteland will be destroyed!
Anyway, the cutscenes are in my opinion a definite improvement over the original. But anyway, Epic Mickey 2 does retain much of that classic Disney charm, and I did want to see more of Mickey's story. I feel like if they could fix the camera, Oswald's AI, the slippery surfaces, and break the repetition a bit, Epic Mickey 2 could be exactly what it tries to be, a truly epic Mickey game.
I'm gonna need a bigger brush.
And for the fourth best Disney game, Disney Infinity 3.0. Hot damn! The original 2 Disney Infinity games were fine, but I think this is easily the most polished of all 3. It even gives a unique story and take on my favorite Disney movie, Inside Out, so it wins a lot of brownie points with me. The cheesiness dial from the first 2 has been dialed back a bit as well, which originally really turned me off Infinity 1. But before we dive into Toy Box mode, let's talk about the Star Wars campaign. Because frankly, it's one of the most polished, responsive, and enjoyable Star Wars games I've seen in years. It gives us a vast array of different Star Wars settings, along with a very smooth combat system with responsive controls. We're even given tons of character-specific moves and combos. Who would have thought that Disney Infinity, essentially Lego Disney, would be the game to master the Star Wars gameplay mechanics? I particularly enjoyed the incorporation of Jedi powers like Force Push. The campaign also has tons of side content and side quests thrown in. Even the driving and pod racing handles top notch. As for Toy Box mode, there's a ton of content to enjoy here. And when you're ready, you can also sample the endless custom levels uploaded by the Infinity community. I also really like the level up system. There's enough customization here between combat, health, defense, and special abilities for me to really feel like players are able to make their own unique character build. Anyway, it was also nice to see a new take on the world of Inside Out. We return to Riley's mind, and even if it's not quite as polished as the original movie, it still felt like the authentic Inside Out world. And just stepping into another story with joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust was a real pleasure for me. The strong voice acting, rumbling sounds, and color choices really threw me into this interactive version of Inside Out.
That was the most traumatic experience of my entire life.
Ew.
But this time, all 5 of Riley's emotions join in, venturing through the recesses of Riley's mind. Essentially, the story this time is, Riley just watched a few seconds of a scary movie before bed, throwing her imagination into chaos.
She's falling asleep!
What was that? What? Who changed the...
Don't look at me! Riley dropped the remote!
I can still hear the horror.
Actually, Del Carmen, Inside Out's director, used this game as an excuse to revisit some of the content cut from the original movie. One of these cut bits was how music is incorporated into Riley's mind, and how it affects her emotions world. I also like how each separate emotion is given its own unique strengths and weaknesses here. Like anger can walk across lava, joy can float, sadness can stand on the clouds, and fear's a speedy runner. Makes sense? There's also the Marvel campaign, which was essentially Loki teaming up with Ultron, and it's similarly incorporated with solid battle mechanics, clear tutorials, and an engaging enough new Marvel adventure. Anyway, I think Disney Infinity 3 improves a lot upon its prequels, and creates a polished, imaginative gameplay experience, with just as many customization options as ever. And the third worst Disney game is Disney Extreme Skate Adventure. See, this is why we invented the word tacky. For sellout games like this with cheap graphics, Tony Hawk rip-off gameplay, and typical pop songs blaring in the background. Even the voice acting sounds more second-rate, cringy, and phoned in than usual. It's probably not a surprise it reminds me so much of Tony Hawk though, as the engine is ripped directly from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Mostly, we're just doing done-before challenges under the pretense of a cheap, contrived Disney-themed story, such as Timon and Pumba trying to beat Scar's skating record. That's right, apparently the evil Scar has a skating record for sliding around the Pride Lands on a piece of bark. Have you seriously ever heard of Disney pulling out something so infinitesimally stupid? Well, yeah, there is the direct-to-DVD sequels, anyway. I mean, we've got the standard collectibles, Woody has his badges, Tarzan has spearheads, and Timon and Pumbaa have grubs. But why? Why am I skating with Timon and Pumbaa on a piece of tree peeling? Anyway, there's really not much else to say about Disney's Extreme Skate. You'll probably breeze through it in a couple of hours if you don't bother with the collectibles. It just feels like a cheap Tony Hawk clone, and frankly, experiencing it just makes me miss the days of playing through Tony Hawk 3 and 4. Anyway, moving on.
Let's just say it's not something I care to describe.
And for the third best, Disneyland Adventures Kinect. I'm probably a bit biased here because it's been my dream to go back to Disneyland in California for a long time. And frankly, I've always really liked the Kinect motion control technology and how it got people off the couch. And it saddened me to find that, in the end, motion control is just a passing trend. So when Disney tries to create an immersive simulation experience of visiting the Disneyland park while using motion control technology, well, that's basically the kind of novelty gaming experience I dig. What really surprised me here is just how meticulously the Disneyland park is recreated. The park is a near-perfect 2-scale rendition of Disneyland. You can start walking from the main gate of the park and walk all the way back to Mickey's Toontown and everywhere in between. And nearly every inch of the park is there, save for certain shops, restaurants, and toilets. To add to the immersion further, we even get the same ambient music you'd hear in the actual park. As well as this, the more annoying parts of the Disneyland experience just aren't there as much. Like, you're not going to have to sit in line for 20 minutes, or wade through more crowds than a Tokyo subway. And it's not a searing hot summer day. And we won't just be running into sunstroking actors playing Disney mascots. No, we'll be dancing with the real Mickey Mouse. Grab his autograph, bring it in, the usual mascot jazz ensues if you so wish.
Do you have a collection of books like this? I collect things too.
The Disney crew even asks your help with some side quests, which really helps exploration. The goals are pretty simple. Mickey wants you to get some autographs for him, Ariel wants you to collect some dingle hoppers, and frankly, none of the goals are particularly challenging. Though I guess the point is just that we're helping out our favorite Disney characters. And I think many kids and adults may enjoy the novelty of that in itself. But what about those motion controls? Well, with the Kinect, you can use your arm to guide your character around, which is sufficient for heading in the right general direction. But it makes stopping to take pictures of certain landmarks needlessly difficult. Even just waving to get a character's attention can be an ordeal. Keep waving, wait a few seconds for the character to acknowledge you, and make sure the wave meter doesn't suddenly disappear. These issues make the voice controls for certain functions particularly helpful. And the rides? Well, there are 18 attractions represented, and each one is pretty visually capturing and very reminiscent of the actual experience you might have at Disneyland. For example, in Peter Pan's Flight, you fly with Peter over a lovely animated London, enter Neverland, and ultimately duel with Hook himself. In Space Mountain, you go on a speedy journey through the stars that brings you close to a black hole, a gas giant, and a comet field. These experiences can be pretty enthralling, but unfortunately, the controls can once again dissolve much of that Disney magic. On Space Mountain, for instance, as on many other attractions, you steer with your arms. And while you're hurtling through space, asteroids, and space debris, the controls often just aren't precise enough to let you reliably navigate around these obstacles. So obviously, this isn't a game for everyone. It seems to aim generally at a younger demographic and theme. So for those who are looking for a 50-hour epic on stopping an evil god from taking over the world, well, keep looking. But for those casual gamers who might enjoy a surprisingly immersive recreation of the Disneyland park and can forgive some clunky controls, well, you may just enjoy this. And the second worst Disney game is Mickey Mouse Capade. Originally, Disney and Capcom decided to work together in 1987 to start making games. And at first, this seemed like a really bad idea, because we ended up with Mickey Mouse Capades. But in this case, they did strike gold later and create DuckTales, but more on that later. According to the manual, Mickey and Minnie are trying to rescue their mystery friend, and that's all we're told. Well, fine. Be that way, story. I didn't want to know your secret mystery friend any dang way. So to start with, Minnie tags along behind Mickey at all times. And while I loved having Tails tag along like this in Sonic Genesis games, Minnie is unfortunately designed as an annoying tag-along nuisance that greatly hinders gameplay. For one thing, she can be repeatedly captured by this obnoxious pink troll, and in order to win the level, you have to have Minnie. So we have to go and find the secret bonus stage, wherein you get one chance to find her in 4 crates. But watch out, because there's always a 75% chance you'll be wrong. And if you fail, well, tough bickies, you can just try again, and again, and again. How is a person meant to do this without quick save? This would drive me bonkers without a save and load state. The developers have seriously worked overtime here to drive gamers mad. And even in every other aspect, the game is just horribly unforgiving. If you only just make a cliff jump, Minnie may just slip off right behind you, leaving Mickey so distraught he just decides to end it all. Jeebus, Mickey. The first level is apparently meant to be a fun house. But this is a criminally inappropriate use of the word fun, because shooting random parts of walls and paintings in a desperate attempt to figure out where the bejeebers I'm meant to be going is not exactly stimulating. I could watch the paint on the wall dry, and at least then I wouldn't have to shoot every part of it. This is just an OCD nightmare. You might have to shoot a random patch of wallpaper, and if you shoot it a few more times, you might be able to progress with the game. Or that stupid pink monster might steal Minnie again, starting the whole process of finding her over. And even when you get to the forest stage, we have to shoot almost every single tree just to reveal hidden doorways. And if you enter these doors in the wrong order, boom, back to the start for you. Bosses are stupidly difficult too, taking unfathomably large amounts of Mickey's puny magic mid-stars before finally giving up the ghost. And these guys chop down your life meter like sliced Bega cheese. It's just like a nightmare that continually repeats itself until you wake up. Or you could stop playing the game. The enemies are all syrupy sweet as they slam their deadly, brightly coloured flesh against you. In fact, the bosses almost look kinda cute. But they cannot quell the infuriation I'm feeling as these creatures repeatedly stomp me into the ground. Mousecapade's gameplay is annoying, the colours are blaringly loud and ugly, and the puzzles involve endlessly shooting random pieces of wall. Capcom, thank Jeebus you later gave us DuckTales. And I think the second best Disney game is Castle of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse. Now this is more like it, paying heavy homage to the original Castle of Illusion game. This remake re-envisions a classic with even more polish. I particularly like the storytelling techniques and pacing here, using the narrator to keep us informed and on the same page through the whole game.
The Castle of Illusion was Mizrabel's twisted playground of trickery and peril. Nothing there was as it seemed.
Although some people were annoyed by the narrator, I personally felt his storytelling fits well, as Mickey seamlessly moves through the forest with responsive smooth controls and all sorts of visual treats along the way. Even Mickey's jumps and hops are sprinkled with personality, giving us constant little quirky sounds and echoes to help colour the goodness. I also like that, as well as Castle of Illusion, the remake pays homage to games like Mickey Mania too, even incorporating some of their gameplay mechanics, like Mickey shrinking in size or running from a boulder towards the player. The story's basically that Minnie has been captured by the evil Mizrabel, and she, of course, wants to steal Minnie's youth and beauty. So Mickey races off to rescue her, and on the plus side, at least we know exactly what castle the princess is in this time. Haha. Some people did feel the visual remakes of these castles and worlds look cliché nowadays, but personally, I really like the new world design. Unlike Mickey's magical mirror, this fortress still feels like a castle of mystery, teeming with magic and secrets. In fact, I feel like I'm wandering through every Genesis platformer color scheme on the market here. I've heard a few complaints that this remake is too easy, and admittedly, the original did have people getting game over a lot more. But I think this remake is more about telling its interactive story smoothly, rather than genuinely challenging a player with very difficult platformer puzzles. And I think whether you consider this a good or a bad thing really just depends on the type of gamer you are. For me, I really enjoyed both the 2D and the 3D platforming because of all the changing scenery, colourful settings and smooth controls. Because of its easiness, Castle of Illusion Remastered is certainly a kid-friendly platformer, but I think older viewers can still enjoy that classic Disney charm, ambience and nostalgia.
Pathetic! You dare to challenge me? Me?
And before we get to the number ones, let's go through some quick honourable mentions. DuckTales Remastered. Now this was the real classic Capcom Disney team-up. This remake of the Capcom platformer was lovingly recreated with a freaking ton of care to detail. Like, they were so meticulous with recreating the original that they bring back the freaking 96-year-old voice actor for Scrooge, Alan Young.
If they think they can stand between Scrooge McDuck and his 3 cubic acres of cash, they've got another thing coming.
Jeebus, that is dedication to your character. Even if Alan hadn't reached such a ripe old age. I'd half expect him to rise from the grave just to reprise his role. They even brought in the animators who worked on the original game for even further detail, and the gameplay is just as solid as the original Capcom version. It's still really satisfying to guide Scrooge treasure hunting through these gorgeous creative environments. And I love the satisfying way Scrooge still bounces from enemy to enemy with his pogo stick cane. And the music is just geared towards that retro nostalgia. Many people's biggest complaint with DuckTales Remastered was that emphasis on dialogue and story, and this can be pretty obtrusive on gameplay and jar the experience a bit, as great a job as the voice actors do in these cutscenes. But apart from that, there's very little to complain about in what is a very affectionately recreated rendition of the timeless DuckTales platform, Aladdin on the Mega Drive. Who doesn't remember this one? This was one of the first real gems from Disney Interactive Studios, and it's surprising that a movie cash-in actually turned out to be one of the most substantial platformers on the Genesis. You sword swipe and apple throw your way with Aladdin as you navigate your way through deserts, dungeons, and caves. Even Genie's Lamp gets its own stage. It had memorable catchy Genesis music, clear storytelling, smooth jump puzzles, and it could be brutally tough. So much so that I never actually finished it. But hey, I still enjoyed trying. Timon and Pumba Jungle Games. I got so much freaking joy out of this game as a teenager. It was one of the first casual games I played, and helped prod me into eventually becoming more of a casual gamer. The quips and comments from Timon and Pumba are perfectly placed, and I liked the combination of point-and-click casual fun with some cool arcade games. There's a version of Frogger with Timon and lily pads, there's Pinball, there's even a version of Space Invaders with Pumba burping. Not that well known, but just one of my old personal favorites. Lion King for Genesis and SNES. Who designed this stupidly difficult game? I kinda liked the roar and roll moves as a kid, but jeebus did this game frustrate me. I feel like I actually dislike the I Can't Wait to Be King song more just because of how much time I spent slamming my head into the desk trying to finish that stupid stage. Club Penguin, Elite Penguin Force. Although it's mostly discontinued, and I'm not really sure if the unofficial servers are safe nowadays, I would really enjoy talking about the online game Club Penguin sometime. But either way, the DS game was a solid portable add-on to Club Penguin that let gamers dive into a ton of fast-paced, enjoyable, easy to pick up, and surprisingly well-orchestrated minigames, like minecarts or snowboarding, even fishing. They could then transfer the points they got from these games onto their online character, which was awesome. It's got a great adventure field too, which is quick to navigate, and it's full of those welcoming, colourful penguins in the traditionally icy atmosphere of Club Penguin's world. If Club Penguin was still officially run and safe to use in your browser, I would recommend this DS edition. Quackshot. We're essentially just helping Donald shoot plungers, yet it feels so dang cool. I love the Indiana Jones style attire and the search for treasure. Somehow this theme just works so well for Donald. The animation of Quackshot and its catchy Genesis style music was what stood out most to me about it. But overall, it's a fun, if slightly floaty adventure platform. Anyway, on to the number ones. And the number one worst Disney game is Fantasia on the Genesis. I grew up with this game and I could never get past the second level. The second freaking level. And I dedicated a whole weekend to it. In fact, back in the days of Blockbuster Video, I re-borrowed it and just tried to win it again. To no avail. Unresponsive, clunky controls and broken platformer puzzles made this game a head-smashingly frustrating experience to play. The story's so hack that it barely even matters. The wizard Yen Sid's music is stolen away, and Mickey has to retrieve it from the Fantasia worlds. But chances are you'll never deliver any music back to him, because that requires a player to actually finish a level, and I wouldn't trust that task to an Olympic-winning South Korean StarCraft champion. How could one of the most epic, majestic Disney movies of all time be twisted into such an ugly, dull, soulless cash grab of a game? Mickey handles more like a runaway pickup truck with 4 flat tires. You'll be lucky if his tiny magic twirl attack hits anything. And when Mickey finally jumps after his long wind-up animation, he floats around like he's on the fricking moon. And that's the thing. The ultra-difficult platforming puzzles require precision that the game will just not give you. In fact, you're a Herculean hero game star in my books if you can get to the second level. There's nothing else to say about Fantasia. This was 2 frustrating weekends of my childhood that felt fundamentally worse for the existence of this game.
Would you like to play again?
You have selected no.
And I think the number one best Disney game is Kingdom Hearts 2. Man, this game was so special to me as a teenager. It's the Disney game I've remembered distinctly for 15 years. This was a point of the story where it wasn't so pretentious and stupidly unnecessarily complicated that you needed 15 million I-Squinto add-on games just to make a meek effort to explain the story. There wasn't 3 hours of black-coded exposition dialogue for every one battle scene. If you do like the extended Kingdom Hearts story, more power to you. But personally, I just can't stand it.
Xehanort needs 13 vessels to hold his essence.
Husks? Not me. You up for another coup?
There was simply a great balance of Disney worlds, Final Fantasy characters, and absolutely touching scenes. It was this combination that made Kingdom Hearts 2 the beautiful and incredible epic experience of a game it was. A game that even 15 years later can still make me shed a tear from so many beautiful moments and scenes. The gameplay and combat mechanics were simply fantastic. Even though I essentially just spent half the game mashing A and wailing on enemies with my Keyblade, I could have kept mashing that button all day and still loved it. A lot of the flaws of the original Kingdom Hearts gameplay had been addressed, and there was just enough complication to the battle mechanics where I didn't feel confused. Let me give you a quick example of a beautiful scene. Just look at this scene for a few seconds and tell me, even without context, you don't feel something.
We'll go together.
Yeah. When I see these scenes, I feel a real emotional stirring. And that stirring, that feeling, is the real power of Kingdom Hearts that the series can still wield to this day. Yeah, there were still flaws, corny translations, and cheesy moments, but I felt this was the exact point in the series where things felt just about perfect. As for the story, this is actually a game about Sora. Not Organization 13, and not all the spiky-haired, terribly named tools that work for it. Nor is it only Kingdom Hearts because it happens to feature Keyblades. This is a game about Sora, Riku, Mickey, Donald, Goofy, and all the other characters that sucked us into the world to begin with. It's spiky-haired, cool-looking Final Fantasy characters wailing on Disney characters with giant keys, which fundamentally is all Kingdom Hearts has to be. Admittedly, Roxas is the focus of the first hour, but I will say that Roxas feels more important to the story than any of the other organization members I've seen, since he's Sora's nobody. And I really enjoyed that lazy afternoon atmosphere the start of the game builds with Roxas and his friends. And when Sora finally emerges to meet Donald and Goofy, it feels golden.
Donald! Goofy!
Beyond all the self-aggrandizing light and darkness gibberish, there was a clear, simple goal for our hero Sora to achieve. Find Kairi and Riku. Just find your friends, that's it. Don't go forward and back in time, don't go into a dream, don't find some heartless nobody light dark dibbly-doo emotion analogy. Just find your freaking friends. But aside from the story, I also love the characters. I love the gameplay of exploring Disney worlds and fighting villains both Disney and non-Disney alike. And the music is just timelessly special. Even from those not interested in the story, I still think there's a lot of beauty and charm to be found in everything else about this game. And that's where the Kingdom Hearts series excels, in its attention to music, to mood, and to emotion. In its epic scale boss fights and unique colourful monster designs. In fact, the final boss fight against Xemnas is probably my favourite boss fight in all of gaming history. It's artistic, it's elegant, it makes no sense, it's cheesy and hammy combined with a perfect soundtrack to accompany it. It's just a rush. Sora also had a good balance here in personality. He hadn't reached the point of Kingdom Hearts 3 where he'd become so vapidly brainless and dim-witted that he couldn't even gather enough common sense to operate a freaking smartphone.
What's this? Magic stop! But I don't know how.
But he did still feel like a cheery, pleasant guy, even insightful about interpersonal relationships at times. But probably my biggest complaint with 2 was the same as many. Dang, these games had some cheesy scenes. I think at this point, the creators were still figuring out that their primary demographic was teenagers and adults, so a lot of sickly sweet scenes made it in that can probably half be blamed on bad translations, but that insipid sweetness is almost the price of entry for Kingdom Hearts. For all my complaints on how the series has progressed in needless complexity, Kingdom Hearts 2 was a game I enjoyed and replayed all through my teen years, and I still remember it distinctly today. Its graphics may have dated, but its heart remains as clear as day. Kingdom Hearts was the best balance of the magic of Disney while combining the golden age of Final Fantasy, creating something I think we've never seen before or since. I personally consider Kingdom Hearts 2 the absolute best Disney game. Anyway, compared to many other game companies, I do feel there's been very reasonable quality control on Disney games, and I rarely ran into any outright abysmal games. Very scarcely did it feel like they were simply selling parents a game box with a picture of a Disney character. Instead, each game often had distinct gameplay mechanics and personality. And given these games go back over 30 years, I'd say there's a pretty decent track record. And as I mentioned, there's a lorry load of these games over the years, so if you did feel I missed a particularly good or bad one, feel free to leave your own thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.